Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the RedShark interview podcast, bringing you deep, expert-led discussions on the latest developments in video technology and filmmaking. I'm your host, Chris Wells, and in today's episode, I'm talking to Brett Danton, an award-winning director and DOP whose career began as a high-end advertising photographer working with major brands across the globe. Brett has since established himself as a leader in virtual production, speaking on behalf of companies about cutting-edge virtual production techniques and serving on judging panels that evaluate technology in production, making him the perfect man to talk to about the new Blackmagic URSA 12K, offering insights that only someone with the oodles of experience like Brett can provide. He is someone that every time I run into, I can just ask him what he's been up to and my brain melts at the answer. He's often using technology and techniques I've never heard of and probably won't for another 6 months. And because of that, he's one of the very few people I can honestly say actually lives in the future. This conversation was recorded online last month and is in fact available as a video on the RedShark News YouTube channel. And so, let's hear from Brett Danton about his hands-on experience with this groundbreaking camera technology. And how are you doing, Mr. Brett?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So just for the audience at home, can you just talk about some, introduce you? Who am I talking to today?
I'm not really too sure who I am now. I sort of reinvent myself quite a bit. So my background was high-end stills photography, did that for many years, jumped into director of photography, directing, and sort of even now I'd almost more class myself as a technologist. And there's a new job title I want to bring in the world of cinematography called digital cinema photographer. I tend to view myself that now. So I'm doing a lot of stuff between motion effects work inside a 3D world, real world, combining all of those things together. So I'm using my knowledge of shooting in the real world and taking that into a 3D world and combining the two. So a lot of high-end visual effects work.
And what sort of media are you kind of producing with that as well?
So we're doing a lot of stuff. We're doing a lot of stuff for cars is probably one of the main things that we're doing. But, with that sort of media that we're coming out, it's all high-end 4K, HDR, finished content, sort of cinema quality is kind of where I sit it, to be honest with you.
And cinema quality is definitely the name of the game because we're looking at the Blackmagic URSA Cine 12K, which you've been having a bit of a play around with. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm always a firm believer in shooting in RAW. I have done for ages, and all my work that I shoot is always been in RAW. So even going back years ago when the first cameras came out shooting 4K RAW, I've always shot that. So I had this camera for 3 days to play around when Magic sort of first sent it to me, putting it through not through as many paces as I'd like to put it through, but I've put it through a base to see where I feel it sits.
Okay, so what kind of paces were you putting it through? What kind of experiments?
Yeah, I've got a friend who's got quite a good studio down here. I ran over to them, and obviously the big thing I wanted to have a look at was image quality. You've got a 12K image there, and obviously Blackmagic talk a lot about, the dynamic range as well. So that was something I want to have a look at. I want to see how the colors all sat in studios, all of that sort of stuff. So that was really what I wanted to, have a look at all of those things.
So were you filming like models in there, or were you just filming cars? Were you filming objects? What?
We put the camera into a quick set, sort of like it looked like something out of Transformers, and we put it in there. And the good thing about that was we had a lot of lighting, backlighting and all that, and we could have a look at what the camera did. I'm quite lucky. I live near the beach, so I ran it down, took it outside. My friend of mine always says, "Oh, you can never show sunsets," which I laugh about. But I did shoot some stuff at sunsets to have a look at the dynamic range, and I shot some stuff looking from inside to outside to see what that, what it looked like as well. And and just to judge image quality and see how that all resolved. Obviously, large format. I'm a bit of a lover of large format because I shoot a lot of stuff in volume stages. And obviously, the larger the sensor size is better for moire. So that's something that's really important for me. And obviously, this camera is going to certainly provide that. We are going to be shooting with it in a volume stage at some stage this year. So that's going to be something I'm really going to be looking forward to trying.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, to take apart from there. But let's go first. So let's go back. You're in the studio, you're filming. How did, your kind of first impressions of using the camera? Had you used a Blackmagic camera before, cinema camera?
Yeah, so I think for me, look, I'd used Blackmagic cinema cameras when they very first came out. And, I'm not going to hold back. They didn't have the best wrap. The build quality on them wasn't amazing. Image quality, I think, was probably fine. But this camera, the first thing that I noticed when I took it out is it's built really well. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's a heavy camera. You don't buy it for its lightness. But there again, you think about what it's doing. It's capturing 12K RAW, large format. I've shot with a Lexus 65. That isn't exactly a light format camera. I come from the days of film. We used to shoot 4,000-foot mags on the back of cameras. So this camera is heavy, but for what it's doing, it's not heavy, if that makes sense. So weight wise, interchangeable mounts on it, all of that was fantastic. Obviously, it uses the bigger capacity batteries, so it needs this higher current draw. But again, that's because of what that sensor is doing. It's pretty phenomenal what that sensor is recording. So that was my first really pleasant surprise. The next surprise for me, which I really enjoyed, and I think cameras are missing now, is it's got a proper viewfinder. I am so sick of cameras coming out now without viewfinders. And even some of the higher end cameras now, you've got to buy a third party viewfinder. This has a viewfinder built in, or it comes with a viewfinder, and you can use the controls on top. And that for me, that's something, I don't understand how people can just use screens in bright sunlight. That doesn't happen. So yes, to have a proper viewfinder. It then also has it has a very large screen on both sides. And the thing that's really nice about this is that on the right-hand side, where your focus puller or your camera operator, they can have a completely different screen to the other side. So from that perspective, it's a really hands-on camera for the rest of the crew. So that's really been thought about, and I was pleasantly surprised about that. The monitors on the sides are bright; they're really clean. You could definitely pull focus on it. So by rights, you wouldn't need to even add an external monitor to the camera. So in terms of all of that, it's already built in. Had power outputs, which was important. I could run follow focus, all of that stuff straight off it. Slightly different way to me to read. I'm used to reading off waveforms and stuff like that. You more use the histogram to judge the exposures on it, and a couple other things like that. The other thing that I found really interesting was the menu system on it. A lot of cameras have come out with really complicated menu systems. I found this menu system really easy, straight in. Didn't get stuck with it. Very simple to operate. As I say, you can use it from either side. And again, then the multiple amount of formats you can shoot in. I mean, that was quite incredible. The frame rates that this camera goes up to in 12K, 4K, all of that, all the different formats. Yeah, there's a plethora. There's nothing that it doesn't cover on that.
Yeah. What kind of formats were you filming in while having a go with it?
So I pretty much went straight to 12K because that's really what I wanted to have a look at. I wanted to see how lenses resolved. I wanted to see how that goes. I mean, I've shot so much 4K. Well, I've shot 6K RAW pretty much, and I wanted to see where the next thing was. For me, I know Blackmagic, they're sort of positioning this towards, probably dramas and stuff is what they're talking about. But my gut feel is that, and I said to you pre this, is that if I was somebody out shooting stock stuff, this is probably the camera I'd go and buy because, I mean, if you're relying on your income of shooting stock footage, you want it to last for a very long time. And with this camera, if you went out and shot 12K RAW, it's not going to go out of date. I mean, that's the first use case I can see for it. For me, the other thing that I've been looking at, we've shot some background plates that we're going to use for the volume stage. Interesting enough, the volume stage that we're using is actually a 12K native wall. So I'm going to find that really interesting. We'll put these up as background plates. And we have noticed when we've used stuff of other formats, you can see the image degradation. So I'd be really interested to see what the 12K plates look like up there. The other thing that my friend was really interested in is they shoot a lot of different formats. Everybody has to shoot now. You've got to shoot for TikTok, Instagram, vertical, all these different formats. So obviously having that 12K file, you can pull out anything you want. I mean, if I see another motion camera rolled on its side, that's me. I'm old school, but that sort of that makes me almost cry when I see that. And also as well, a lot of those cameras is not great for because the heat needs to flow through them. So they got really excited about that, and that's something that they went off and tested, and they said, well, in studio, I could really see this working for us because we can literally shoot to any format. And then there is another button which they got really excited about, which is grab still. And you can still shoot a stills frame. And they're massive stills files. They were DNG, RAW, 12K still files. Bang, press a button. That opened up a whole new plethora, which I only realized when I got back and started playing around in post, is that, as I say, I've used Blackmagic stuff for a long time. I come from when we used to grade motion in DaVinci Resolve when it used a Kodak film scanner. So I've used Resolve for that long. So for me, to be able to take the motion files and take the stills files, you can grade it all in the same grade inside of Resolve and output it. So you could output a diff and this or output your motion. And that opens up something really interesting as well. So that's something that I think has been a little bit of a struggle in the past, is quite often when you shoot the stills and you shoot the motion, if the camera can do both, it quite often shoots a slightly different format, or Resolve doesn't want to take in, or when you take it in, it's got to be graded slightly different. This just graded up the same. So I could get a complete uniformity between everything I was producing. And that opened up a new thing. And the other big thing for me is, obviously, as I said to you, I've become a bit of a hybrid worker now where we're doing a lot of visual effects work. And the thing with the visual effects work is quite often you need excess in your image. We go out and shoot a lot of background plates as well that we don't know what we're going to be inserting into that. So, for example, we went to Namibia, we shot big, beautiful aerials. Now we know we're going to insert cars into that at some stage. And we've tracked all the footage. We've got tracking markers where the drone flew. But that's a 6K. Now the thing is, if I got 12K, I can crop into that. So almost I've got so much more I can do with that image. So that was one of the reasons that I was really keen to try this camera.
And what kind of scenarios and workflows would you see this being possibly one of the kind of best solutions for compared to something like an ARRI or another kind of cinema camera?
I mean, obviously having the interchangeable mounts makes something really, really good. Also as well, I mean, I think keeping it in that whole Blackmagic ecosystem, especially if you're shooting stock and stuff like that, you tend to grade it yourself so you can take stuff straight into Resolve. The workflow was really simple. I've been using the cloud workflow on Resolve for a while now, and it just works. And this just works. You could go off and do 12K footage on this without a problem. I've got a machine sitting behind me, which is ridiculous. It's got a render box, got 14 A6000 cards in it. That I had at one stage testing. I think I had 8 streams of 12K raw just to see, and they were all playing back in real time on that machine. That was crazy. But at the same time, because of the workflow that they've got with Resolve Cloud, you can easily cut this all on a MacBook Pro because it's in the cloud and it's pulling it all down. So that works. It's generating the correct proxies. It's putting the correct colors on it so you can take it into grade. So, that side of this camera, I think, it's just so usable, and anybody who knows the ecosystem can find it really easy to work across.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So moving along now on your test about dynamic range, how did the dynamic range of the camera compare to others that you'd used before?
Yeah, so I think the dynamic range was the thing that blew my mind. The dynamic range blew my mind. We were in a studio, we put in backlights, put in front lights, we had a couple of lights that we put in, and the waveform was not peaking out. It was not peaking out. I mean, I'm used to trying to decide which bit I'm going to keep inside of that waveform. It was there. Everything was there. And that was something where I went, wow, I would expect that to go. When I went down and we shot, the sun dropping behind some clouds over the ocean, it was all there. Everything was there. There was no clipping. It wasn't even getting close to where it needed to clip, which was ridiculous. Same again, I put the camera inside. I was looking outside. Didn't need any lighting inside. It was exposing for outside. So I guess, I mean, that's where I and I know Blackmagic have been talking about dramas. For things like dramas and stuff, yes, I could see where that would really work because that dynamic range is massive. I mean, it would certainly save on lighting, that's for sure. And anybody who likes to work with available light, but this camera would allow you to do that. And I think to see stuff that people might start to shoot with available light could get quite exciting. I mean, running down into low light is going to be really exciting, even if you need to drop noise reduction onto it, which again, I'd love to test that more. But with a 12K file, you drop noise reduction on that, it's still going to be fine. So all of that side of it. So I think we might start to see some absolutely magic shots coming out of this camera that people haven't seen before.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. I'm just hoping they don't keep things too dark for people with high contrast TVs so nobody's complaining. Not another Game of Thrones situation going on.
Yeah, well, I think that's, for me, that is almost a classic example of maybe trying to, when cameras started coming out and they had that dynamic range, but they weren't quite there, but they saw into the shadows, people getting excited. Whereas this, I think, gives you ability to maybe give you that Game of Thrones dark look, but you can see into the shadows because of the dynamic range of it.
That's the dream, because I feel like, natural light especially is getting a bit of a resurgence at the minute and is kind of, people are really using that flexibility. So I'm really excited to see.
I mean, I remember years ago when I sort of started, I went to one of Dean Semler's talks, and he pretty much lights a lot of his films with natural light as much as he can. And he would have lights standing around on stands ready to go if they needed them, but they wouldn't turn them on unless they had to. And I think this camera will probably open up a lot of that sort of stuff. As I say, it's not the lightest thing I've used, and the power draw, it needs the bigger batteries that are out there now.
Yeah.
But when you think about what it's doing, or if, you look back at an IMAX camera, I mean, those things were massive. So really, for what it's doing, it's not that big.
Did you ever go with any of the higher frame rates or anything on there?
We did run through some of the other frame rates, and yeah, I mean, quite phenomenal what it will do on the other frame rates.
Yeah.
We went through, we played around with different hertz as well. We tried it as well just to make sure it would sync in with some of the lighting. It synced in with the lighting, all of that. So as I say, again, that menu system was really easy. I only shot in RAW. I didn't shoot any of the compressed codecs. Again, that's something because Blackmagic was sort of sending it around to quite a few people, so I had it for a few days. But from what I shot with it, yeah, as I say, I would definitely take it into a volume stage for sure. That's something I would really like to see. And a volume stage is an interesting beast to shoot in, because although the dynamic range isn't as big because you're relying on the dynamic range of the screen, you also have an issue with how your lighting might be on the foreground, on the people outside of the dynamic range, and your colors are really important inside of there as well. So I think, and as I say, Amore. So I think in a volume stage, it's really going to pull out something.
Yeah, just for the audience at home, like, what are the kind of challenges? Like, what is a Amore effect? That, especially when it comes to volume stages.
So Amore effect is, and look, it's getting better and better. But Amore effect is because the screen has a dot on it. So and then also as well the sensor, because obviously you got your different layers, also has a dot. So when those two dots touch each other and move around, it creates a pattern. You've probably seen it when a newsreader wears a checkered coat on TV, and they suddenly start strobing, and that's Amore. So normally in a volume stage, you can't focus sharply on the screen behind because you get Amore coming in. As pixel pictures are getting smaller and smaller, and that's the dot they're referring to on the screen, it's getting better and better. So I know that we've been using screens now which is sort of 2.3. I actually used a 1.5 pixel pitch screen a while ago that I could just focus on. And I've got a job that we're looking at the moment. The specs have just come through that people are looking at, and it's a 0.78 pixel pitch, which is tiny, yeah. Which means with a camera like this, you should be able to focus sharply on the screen, and that should open up a whole new thing. Now, that opens up to what people have been developing, which is where you can then pull focus through the screen, because that's been something you haven't been able to do. People did it, but obviously then it was an issue with the Amore that came up. So in theory, what you should now be able to do is then pull focus to the person, to the screen, and then through the screen. So that'll open up a few more things there as well.
Is there any other kind of scenarios that this will help with? Because like the Amore can, I never thought about focus pulling and the kind of effects that would do. Is there any other kind of scenarios that this camera unlocks for people, or maybe people that have never used a camera this kind of high-end before?
Well, if you think about it, to get to this quality before, you would have been up in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, really, to be honest with you. I mean, that's where you would have sat, because, if you look at like an IMAX camera or a Lexus 65 or something like that, I mean, they're very expensive cameras. You can't even buy them. You have to rent them. So, to be able to have something like this is quite phenomenal. And obviously, and then they've got a 17K version as well, which is something that this is why I also want to try this, because we're doing stuff with Vision Pro. So I'm very keen to try that with the stereo imaging, and we've been rendering stereo images out on the computer behind me, and that's been a really interesting workflow. And that's 16K stereo files we've been rendering, so massive files. So that's something that camera should open up. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think for me, where I'm really keen to try it is again on the things like the background plates, and the stuff. So what we tend to do with a lot of this VFX stuff that we've been doing is we go off and shoot a whole load of package of footage when we get to a location, and we've been creating digital twins. So we actually scan in the location as well. So we create a full digital twin, and to go with that digital twin to then use the 3D stuff, we then also shoot real world footage, and that's where I can really see this working for me, because then I've got so much I can use that real world footage for.
Yeah, and what do you normally, and what have you used previously to get that real world footage?
I've used lots of different cameras, Canon, Arri, I've flipped around between all of them. Canon predominantly.
And what resolution were you filming that in?
So I've always gone to the maximum all those cameras will do. So pretty much everything I've done is normally 4K if I can, but then obviously on the later ones is all 6K raw, and everything we shoot in 6K raw. So we did a shoot recently where we had 5, 6, 7 cameras. All the main cameras were all sort of cinema cameras. So all of those 4 were all shooting 6K raw, and then these smaller cameras were all shooting 8K raw. So we had everything coming in on raw, yeah. And 1 week on that set was 28 terabytes, I think. So, we go through a reasonable amount of stuff. And that was at the volume stage, yeah.
And what kind of format is that filmed on? Is that filmed on the Blackmagic's own built-in drives that you kind of take
So
out?
there's two ways you can do with that. So they have a media dock. They have their own drive. Again, you have to buy their drives, but I don't think they're stupid. I mean, I look back to when we used to shoot with the Codex drives on the original Canon C500. Those were frighteningly expensive, those drives. So price-wise, I don't think they're that bad. You can download straight from the camera, or you can use the media dock, which has 3. I used the media dock and pulled it off really fast. It works over 10G Ethernet, so it comes off really quickly. I'm lucky this office here has 25G Ethernet, and it just whipped it straight off. So straight down to our server, and it went. Then using Resolve, pulled it into Resolve, and it created proxies, and off it went. So yeah, no workflow. Very simple, very easy. Yeah, that just seemed to work as well. The drives feel quite nice. Obviously, they create a little bit of heat. There's quite a few cooling on them because I guess they get pretty hot. But yeah, again, nicely made pieces of equipment, come in and out very fast. Look, the only thing I can say that and I know Blackmagic will change stuff, like they bring out new stuff all the time. The only thing I did a couple of times on the top of the viewfinder, there's a couple of buttons. They're quite easy to knock, and a couple of times I hit the run button. But every camera is always going to have one.
Everyone's got to have one. You can never have the perfect camera.
You can never have, no. But outside of that, as I say, everything else works extremely well. And I think it's great. A name like Blackmagic, they're going to push it along. So, and as I say, in that ecosystem, it'll work well. It really will work well.
Have you used any of the metadata or the digital slate stuff?
Yes. So a lot of the metadata that's recorded, that's really useful because we can then take that into our other pieces of software as well. Having the metadata recorded, obviously, that's really important for us with the special effects work. We need to know things like aperture, focus distance, all of that sort of stuff, because that then translates across to the 3D stuff that we're doing. So having all of that is really important, and it's recording all of that stuff for us.
I can imagine it back in the old days. Was that just literally someone's job with a pen and paper to write them all down?
Oh, look, so quite often it had to be recorded separately, and then it was, it wasn't even that long ago. So, we had to have one camera file for all the metadata we were recording, for all the information off the robots and stuff like that, tracking the stuff that was going on inside of Unreal. And then we'd have the camera recording, and then you had to marry it all together, hoping the timecode jammed everything together. And yeah, I would say 30% of the time we were trying to make head or tail of it, and used to slow down all the workflow. Or we'd forget to record one, and we'd only record one side of it. So yeah. So I think the only thing that the people who it's really going to keep on the toes are going to be the focus pullers. So as you can see, I'm getting older. My eyes are going. Large format is hard enough to focus as well. This is a big, large format with 17K. What I thought was pin sharp, that looked to me when I first looked at it, it wasn't pin sharp, and I had to adjust focus. So focus pullers, they're going to go off and have to read the books a lot and study a lot to use this because, and obviously you can stop down, but I really wanted to test it wide open, and that was quite entertaining to have a look at. But there again, you can go back and, crop in sensors, do all sorts of stuff to it. But yeah, you're going to work.
I was going to say, in a lot of the Blackmagic, they don't have all the fancy autofocus things, which you wouldn't use for commercial work anyway. But
exactly, yeah. I was running Cine Primes on it. So
because that's the thing, I feel like a lot of people miss out sometimes when they talk about the Blackmagic. Oh, it doesn't have autofocus. I said, well, I suppose it's not for things that use autofocus.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the focus puller's job is very important, and as you've just said, it's going to be way more difficult. So good luck, focus pullers.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to have to be like a jet pilot. You're going to have to be like a jet pilot and need 20/20 vision and everything.
Yeah, they're going to have to double check everything. Yeah. I really thought I was Razor, and I wasn't.
Yeah,
but that's because I shot it wide open just to have a look. As soon as I stopped it down, it would have been there. But
it's interesting. Just as a side note, I was reading an interview yesterday with David Fincher talking about remastering 7 in 4K, and he said the problem with film going to the higher resolutions as you're upscaling it, you realize there are shots now that you would go, this entire thing is out of focus.
Yeah, exactly. And you see it a lot now, especially from some of the stuff like some of the TV dramas, TV sitcoms. So, you go back and look at stuff that used to go as 1080, and now they've been remastered back to 4K, and they're back on, and you see so much stuff out of focus. I think Star Trek's a classic one for that.
Yeah.
A lot of out of focus.
And they use the whole frame as well, so often you see the edges. Yeah. They did it on Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well. You could see all the equipment.
No, it is quite funny. There's a lot of stuff that you see going on like that, which is quite entertaining. But that goes back to that whole point of why probably, if you want anything for longevity, I'd be going in 12K. I had a client years ago when 4K first came out, and I remember going into somewhere and saying, look, we should do all of this on 4K. And I remember the producer at the time going, oh, no, we're not going to shoot any of this 4K. Nobody will ever use 4K. That's ridiculous. So I talked the client into, we shot everything in 4K RAW. That client is still using those shots for their advertising stuff, and they're very retail, so they need to go back, and they still use that same product. They are still using those shots from 7 years ago that was shot in 4K because it was shot in 4K, and we pulled stills off that. And I think I was one of the first people to go, we can pull stills off this 4K. So to say that 12K isn't going to be the norm, who knows? It might not be the norm, but it could become the norm. So let's have a look at it. And yes, who knows? I mean, at the moment, stuff like Vision Pro headsets and stuff like that, yes, they haven't quite caught on, but we only need to start seeing them getting a lot smaller and a lot cheaper, then they will start catching on. So yes, resolution is going to be important.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said, for special effects as well.
Special effect works, yeah, it opens up so much more that we can crop in. Yeah.
No, awesome. Well, I think that covers everything, Mr. Brett.
Thank you so much, Chris.
So that was my chat with Mr. Brett Danton about the Blackmagic URSA 12K. He just exudes experience, doesn't he? He's clearly been working at such a high, maybe even the highest commercial level for so long. Like, you can just give him any kind of camera and he'll be able to tell you its viability on a realistic scale for the kinds of work that he does, like, more than anything. And yeah, he's definitely a man. If I was ever looking to invest into a camera like that, maybe one day, he'd be the man to talk to for sure. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Brett for coming onto the podcast, as well as to you guys for listening to the inaugural episode of the RedShark Interview Podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks, and in the meantime, for all news, information, and anything else to kind of wet that media technology whistle, head on over to redsharknews.com.